Hey, good morning, everyone. Everyone's good on audio here. Just yell if you can't hear me. Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for making it in this morning. You all look hungover, and that's how I feel. So let's see how it goes. Pretty short for this subject. The reason I'm bringing up Storm is I just don't think it's got enough attention since February. It's been oddly under sort of highlighted by Microsoft, and then there hasn't been a lot going on. So I'm going to add my 2 cents into it, and if you care about Azure, red side, blue side, hopefully this adds to discussion, helps you guys move forward. So there is a lot to cover. I'm going to give a lot of references. On the first page, I'll post all of this, including scripts, on my GitHub. The DC33 repo isn't live, but my GitHub, you can find it, and within a day or two, stuff will be up there. So starting with Microsoft's February update, a few just choice things, in case you don't know, but I'm sure you are aware, right? It first got reported actually on the 13th or the day before as device code phishing, which, if we're into Azure, that's 4.5 years old, at least, of a topic since Syynimaa blogged about it in October 20. So we had known about it, but this was sort of the high profile, we see some device code phishing, Russians, maybe delivered over chat, Graph API data collection, okay, it's gone into the wild, device code phishing. Didn't sound too dramatic. Then a day later, we got the update from Microsoft. And you don't have to read through the things, but what pops is it's not the Outlook client ID that was part of the device code phish that's pretty popular, a Microsoft app being impersonated. It was now more of a hidden service, the authentication broker, which is actually used in device registration, joining the domain, clearly calling out the device registration service and naming some of the actors. But the big one that pops is the PRT hijack, which is the Uber token. Get that? You can then mint refresh tokens. And of course, then OAuth tokens. And that's used for single sign-on and is also part of device registration. So, got a couple words from Microsoft, but it should have been oh shit. Well, we're recording. We'll have to bleep that. I do tend to drop some F-bombs, so if I get warmed up, just run with me. So it should have been an oh shit moment because, every Windows user will, in theory, you want managed and join the domain so you can do all your Intune stuff and all your management, right? And work it into your policies if you're an organization. So it got a couple words and that was it. The sad part is we should have called out Dirk John's research. 1.5 years, October 2023-ish, I don't have the date. Yeah, I do at the bottom. So everyone needs to read that before you go on, right, if you're not familiar. He laid out exactly the TTP. He's probably the godfather of PRT hijacks, device registration, and SSO abuse. So he talks a lot. It's easy to find. He's got to be on the top list to track, no matter what your Azure interests are. And he laid down exactly the TTP, and it's built into his tool set, RoadTX, which also should be in everyone's little collection and bag. So that's the sad part. It takes us not 5 years, although that was the front part of the attack. It also takes us 18 months for the core of the attack to publicize it and do something about it. So it sort of points out how we suck as a community, right? This is our reaction time. We can't get the vendor to help us. What are you guys going to do? Test all the software. So the device registration flow validly looks like this. There's a lot of interchange back and forth. Starts with someone logging in and authenticating with their domain credentials, and then you go through the joining process, right? And then there's a couple back and forths, and along the way, you get a PRT token. It's hidden. Device certificate. It's your sort of device identification, right? And then magic happens when you log into your laptop. And then you can tie it to a PIN, right? You've seen that. Oh, forget your password, just 4 digits. But you have to have the device, right? It's not remotely hackable. So this is the model of why this is created. All for SSO. Log into your laptop, then you can get to Azure and Office and everything in the cloud without having to auth again. And then this is how the attack works at a little bit lower level. So it's the front end part. We now do a device code phish. And the attacker is all remote. no endpoint compromise. That's the beauty of OAuth, made to go over REST APIs. So we don't need endpoint compromise, right? It's everyone wake up, not you guys, but out in the community, right? The 10 years of REST APIs, forget malware on your endpoint. That's still viable, but now we can do it remotely if we just be one of the participants. In this case, get the user to authenticate, we get a token, and then we start doing things on a different IP address. And then we enter the flow. And the attacker can register their own device. It's a fake device. It can be anything, right? Okay, and it's not just grabbing the PRT. That's a pretty good priv-esque. What Dirk John showed is you can also do persistence. You can create another key, not bound to your device, just a Windows hello key that's attached to the user. So even if the first device key gets killed, you got persistence at the same level. You can create another OAuth refresh token, and away you go. So it's pretty bad, right? Pretty bad. There's a few timing issues you got to do to pull off everything, but there's at least 3 stages of goodness in this attack. Even if you just do the device code flow up front, you're good like 5 years ago. You've got a refresh token. You can pivot on a whole bunch of SSO apps. 2, if you get the PRT, which is pretty easy, you can mint refresh tokens. And then 3rd, with a little bit of timing magic, you can grab and create a new user Windows hello key. So this is just a little bit more detail on the device code flow. I'm not going to cover this because there's a ton of material. I've even spoken about it, but you take your pick. The key things is the front-end attack is pretty good because of Microsoft's implementation. You can impersonate their apps. You don't have to create an app. This is modern-day phishing. Why create an app? It's just more to trace to you, become Outlook, become the Microsoft authentication broker. Once you do it, because they used OAuth, straight up OAuth for SSO, you've got well over 30 apps that are called the FOSI apps, family of client IDs. SecureWorks did great research 4-ish years ago. Really good stuff. That's why you can laterally move, right? Which is great for SSO, I guess, and it's great for the attacker for lateral movement. Okay, so that's the nasty stuff. And of course the logs will show the app ID you spoof. Your IP address will get in there, but that's all doable. This is a little bit small. This is the demo script. So this is a script that I'll make live. I'm just going to flip through the key screens. So you start off the script and you're doing device code flow, but you see resources, backend APIs that are enrollment services, device code flow, attackers in control, no secret needed, generate a device code and a user code. You send the user code, they just have to type it in. So if you proceed and send, this is my HTML skills, thank you, still working on it, but you make a code, security incidents are the flavor of the month. Oh my gosh, log in, type in this code, make sure it's you. We got the Russians, for goodness sake, using your account. And you can just make sure it's a Microsoft URL. Let me tell you the best practices, which of course it is, right? The device login is the official login. So you go in as a victim, you authenticate, absolutely use your real MFA code. There's no man in the middle. This is all straight up. And all you get, so let me flip back quickly. I enter a code as a victim. I do my normal auth. And then I've got these two. This is the end of the user experience, the victim. Not that you expect the user to defend themselves, but you don't even get something long and detailed about permissioning. You get the name of the app, which no one understands anyway, and then your confirmation. That's it. But what you've done is authorized the requesting attacker to now get an OAuth token that you just blessed. Depends what scopes they ask for. In this case, it's part of the enrollment service. So this is the payload shipped back to the attacker script, which is just a shell script, power script, doing curl commands. It's nothing complicated. The payload I often show in these screens, right? So the attacker then continues on, and now can start entering and doing some of the actual device registration, right? Again, hard to see using RoadTX toolset from Dirk-Jan. I followed his sort of script, and part of it is to register and get a device certification key. His tools allow changing of the OS, the device name. So on my Mac running a shell script, I decided to use the defaults of registering a Windows 11 device. And Microsoft's happy to give me a device ID for that. And with that, you can certainly, the PRT, you can actually switch over. So this is part of the power, not just generate API tokens, you can flip into browser sessions. So whenever the divide, of course, between API tokens and browser breaks down, it's a big deal, right? You get a little bit of that in AWS, and here's an example in Azure. So that's nice, because sometimes you just want to pop into the browser and take a look, and it's a lot easier to move around and check the OneDrive that way and browse a little bit. And then here's the next step in the attack of Dirk-Jan. Of course, not reported publicly, but very likely what the threat actors did is you could, if you're within a 15-minute time frame and the user's done MFA, which I did, you can generate this persistence, another Windows hello key that can be used to generate a full new PRT, and we can test it, and boom, pop back into a browser session live. So what's it look like from the defensive side? So that's the device named attacker host that is seen in Entra. It's a Windows OS. It's an old version. It's built into Dirk-Jan stuff. It didn't bother changing it. So it looks like a registered device, right? I mean, you could make it anything. Mobile phone, a lot of mobile phones get ignored because they're so noisy. Do whatever. If you generate the user Windows hello key, it's put in as an authentication method, which sort of makes sense. It is a second factor. But you got to realize that if you're on the blue team side. Like, where is it? It's over here under the user authentication methods. I will make one note. This stuff is a moving target. So months ago, I think the defaults have changed for the better by Microsoft. You might find with new tenants or new setups that the authentication methods are not enabled. So of course you can prevent that. You can prevent users from adding authentication methods. But most likely every organization's allowed some, and you might feel more comfortable with more secure ones, right? So you start with, okay, let's start with, software keys. And then, yeah, hardware keys are okay. And hey, certificates, why not, right? I mean, you could see that you'll still find this enabled probably a lot in the population. So again, coming back to the flow, this is what's happening since February, probably much longer and underreported. And the whole point is the impact's huge. The attack surface, if you want to use that term, is huge, because every corporate Microsoft user with more than like 50 users is probably joining domains. I mean, so there's that. So let's talk a little bit deeper about the recommended defenses. Conditional access policies is the most popular excuse probably given for every attack. A little bit of the detection, get into the logs, and then a little bit of the attacker side. There's been some great talks this weekend, stuff I'll have to catch up with on service principal abuse, so it's all related, because OAuth, a lot of times you're just using service principals underneath. So real quick, TTP-wise, front end is initial access is device code phish. Microsoft first-party app impersonation comes along with it. The back-end pivot of changing apps and scopes, this is breaking OAuth, right? You go to the 5,000 pages of OAuth specs. Nowhere does it say auth once, change permissions without the user reapproving. You're supposed to reapprove to get a change in permissions on your token, to get a new token. But Microsoft, because of the SSO piece, can say, here's a token that was Outlook or Graph or whatever, and then thanks for that, now I'm going to switch it for Azure, because all of it's just one big umbrella to Microsoft, right? So that's the point, is on the front end. However, Dirk-Jan's research, when you go to it, is You have to pick up on, don't get fixated on device code phish. It's not the only way to enter into the attack. You could steal a browser session. Dirkjan points that out. So a different way would be to go traditional. How can I steal a session cookie, whatever, from the browser? Endpoint, browser extension, man in the middle. So if we get over fixated defensively on device code phish, yeah, sure, maybe you'll make headway there and then they still get in and have device registration hijack, right? It's the weakness when we think defensively. We take this as the gospel. We got to broaden it and generalize it. Privilege escalation is the piece of getting the PRT token. Elevated privileges, the persistence piece is generating not a device key, but a user key that can then regenerate the PRT. So super deep guts, super common infrastructure, and people aren't talking about it enough. So what did Microsoft say back in February? Well, a lot of gibberish that probably went through marketing to sort of CYA in case anyone dug into it. So I did my natural intelligence summary, so you wouldn't have to read it, but feel free to read it because you should never trust anybody. A lot of conditional access policy to block device code. There is definitely been added in the past year or two device code flow to CAP. You should definitely make use of that. That is a good starting point. We'll come back to that. Train your people. That's stupid. Of course. Yep, layer 8. That applies to everything. Revoke the refresh token. Of course, if you're in an incident, you should do that. The dirty secret is, are you prepared that you can't revoke the access token cleanly in most cases? The 1 hour access token generated by the refresh token, because all the guidance is, no, kill it and then wait an hour. And then the next excuse gets thrown out, which is at the bottom, continuous access evaluation for the access token. So you can read up on that, and we'll get to a slide there, and it's got a bunch of holes in it. So the Swiss cheese comes pretty quickly. Conditional access policy to force reauthentication is not a bad idea, like on certain conditions. Maybe if you join the device to domain, force the user to reauthenticate with MFA. It's not a bad idea, so that's valid, right? MFA, yeah, same thing. Patch Windows 2, right? I mean, take things off the net. That's just dumb. It's too general. MFA is bypassed in here because we're going after the tokens in sessions. So that's just stupid, right? That's just distracting. No offense if you're from Microsoft, but that's just stupid, right? It's a stupid thing to put out of like, be more secure, think about security. How about a long password? That's a good idea too. Factor authentication methods go along with MFA factors. So again, it's a distraction, red herring. There's other things in there like, which are okay at surface, XDR, hunting queries, actual stuff, and I'm sure there's a bunch of KQL out there. But if you start looking at it closer, don't get distracted. Because this approach in this query is measuring user clicks and delays as if we're going to detect that the user is a device code phish and they're pausing before they enter that device code. Yeah, I get that, but I don't think that'll actually work in real life. Right? You're going to work on timing. Even if you could measure that, that's an indication. Hence, it's named hunting, not detection. So, right, hunting really means false positive, right? So if I have something that doesn't work as a detection, I'll still put it out there and call it hunting so that you feel good when you're in the middle of an incident and go through 8 years of logs hunting using this. Okay, moving on. This is a little bit better. This is basically saying, look, start looking at the device registration service logs. That's the top, right? The count app ID. We're getting somewhere. This is now zeroing in on the actual attack, but they covered their butt and said can be useful in conjunction with other stuff, which really means you do the work to make it useful, because just picking up a device registration event, you're going to pick up the valid FPs of users joining the domain, right? This isn't good enough. We have to look at what's odd in the attack. So we're still in that. Sentinel, I'm not saying all of this is bad. I think you just got to sort through the junk and noise and focus in on things. So at the bottom of the Sentinel list, now it's starting to get interesting. What we need to think about defensively is OAuth apps. What API calls might be suspicious to an attacker versus a normal user doing their day job. So if you're hitting and doing discovery in the Graph API, like hitting the /user endpoint to enumerate the whole directory and maybe other objects like SP, service principals, yeah, that's probably better true positive because an attacker's gonna use the APIs and tooling to do a whole bunch of discovery. Versus every day when you use Office, you may not hit that endpoint, right? So I like that. That's worth as a starting point, right? References, I only point out, is part of it. It's not bad background actually on, and they reference the last one on the bottom right is the SecureWorks foci from a couple years ago. So that's kudos to them. But I had to laugh at the second one because I think they purposely put that in to deflect, say, hey, Google's got problems too. It's not just Azure. But the Huntress stuff is useful. So yes, there is stuff out there to maybe zero in on searches, but the problem is it's still too noisy and you're in responsive mode. So this doesn't mean you could run your SOC effectively. It's too noisy, but at least we're talking about something. So what happens with the logs? The logs are a crap show. So these are just sign-in logs, and it's just a little bit around device code attacks. I just want to point out, if anyone has better approaches, do share if the community could use it. My take is out of 100 fields, we shrink it down to about 10. The session ID, the transfer method, the original transfer method, the authentication method that shows device flow, those are important. Session ID, you got to be careful. They group like everything emanating from a user authentication. So you get multiple apps used by that user, plus you get non-interactive events from back-end Microsoft services. It's like this Uber session, but it's getting better. It's better than just searching on the user name, right? It's a little more focused. It's just not a clean session with a clean token. Now, if there's one slide that's valuable here, that is a June publication, I think, update. It's hard as hell to keep up with Microsoft updates, but we got to find better ways to get, oh, you changed something. This is like the 5 most important fields in the logs across sign-in logs and some of the activity logs. So you get a UTI, not the infection, unique token identifier. It's the access token ID. Now, it's not in every single log, but it's in the sign-in logs, the graph logs, and a couple apps. Suddenly, you could have granularity at the access token level. You never have that visibility anywhere in Microsoft, right? You just have these magical OAuth tokens getting created and crap happening. Maybe it'll help you isolate some activity or see it move IP addresses, which could be a compromise of an access token moving elsewhere. Again, this isn't enough to solve problems. It's just getting a lot closer to useful data. So this piece within that Microsoft doc link, look for it, bookmark it. I mean, it's worth every other word in the doc. I keep coming back to it. The UTI, the session ID, the device ID is all sort of explained in here, what the heck they mean from Microsoft's viewpoint. Let's come back to CAP. This stuff is a moving target since last year because I was doing CTFs and trying to lock down things sort of with policy. So the device code's been added. The reference to apps keep changing. The most popular spoofed app for device code flow, Office, is not in the list, but it's still active somewhere. There's all sorts of issues. The recommendation is 1, shut off device code flow if you can. 2, maybe use IP addresses if you can to restrict when users do things. Authenticate period, maybe access the device registration service. Not a bad idea. You should try to do it. I'm just saying, I'm not sure you can be successful. There's a couple if, ands, or buts. So let's start with, why not shut off device code flow? Well, you would think if that's a great idea, they would just do it by default. There's at least 2 things cited that use device code flow. One is in their doc, it's the device registration service. Well, who needs that? Oh wait, isn't the whole attack about that, right? So this one, you gotta be real careful. How do you allow it? Allow it from only company IP addresses? What are you gonna do provisioning and getting users onto the domain? That's not easy, but maybe you can pull it off. The second one, Azure CLI, definitely has valid uses. Any CLI has a valid use for device code. Because if you can't pop up a browser, you can't use the normal one. So if you ever use CLI on a remote host, your admins are going to be pissed. Could you whitelist them by user and by location? Yeah, sure. That's like saying we can put in firewalls, right? For your 50,000 users across the globe. If no one can do that, right? You can maybe pick and choose. Don't get depressed. It's too early. You gotta have some hope. So there is some stuff. It's just you gotta work hard on the conditional access policy side. Dirk John also got the same thing 18 months before in submitting or disclosure process. Basically, the red stuff says, look, Microsoft telling him, well, hey, device code flow can be used validly by the registration service. So, hey, and Dirk John facing what every researcher has faced with every company, not just Microsoft, which is phishing. That's the user's fault. I'm sorry. Good luck. Discovery, pre-auth, not our problem. I mean, users got to be smarter. So this just means if you care about defending, it's going to be a long tail. Plus, it's hard to change for big companies. CAE has been pushed out to kill the actual access token. Sounds great. I mean, it's been pushed for years and years. But when you dig into it, and maybe you guys have tried to implement it, so your opinion counts for more. I'm just a research guy looking at the stuff, playing with it. It's limited support. Microsoft apps. The apps have to be developed to take a signal or generate a signal like, oh no, user compromised in my app, and then send a signal, and then, oh, the access token, let's kill it, right? So it's a participation defense by a few Microsoft apps for a few APIs like Graph. Not saying don't do it, but don't think you're covered. So change your code. All right, this link I have and references, I tried to just learn a little bit from the past 5 years. So I've tried to put down, left side is just a lot of the research ongoing, OAuth starting in 2012 and sort of coming into the attacks, Blizzard included, which used some OAuth apps, but definitely Storm at the bottom. And the right side, the blue, is more Microsoft, which, look, to their credit, they're doing stuff. I bash them, but they are trying. We got to keep track of that trying, because we'll get new knobs to turn. Mostly on the prevention side, not great on the detection side. Logging needs to be changed. We need to get developers to log better stuff. It's horrible. It's horrible stuff. Each app group is different, and you can see it. If you look at graph activity logs, Power BI's an orphan. You should look at these 50 million app logs, and they're all different, and you lose the user, because some of them are generated on the front end, look like a web server log. You get an IP address and a user agent, and you're like, I don't even know what is this, right? It's supposed to be an API call. It looks like a web request from a VPN, right? So it's all, these are the references from the prior diagram. Nothing new, but a little easier to manipulate. Since February, what's happened? Not much, at least from my initial cursory. So again, do a little NI summary for you, or maybe, it's not so good, natural stupidity, maybe NS. Microsoft's original one, a bunch of, to be fair, I just wanted to point out, there's a few talks, but the trade regs are useless. Velexity, look, I want to give them credit. It's a decent device code phish explanation, but they mentioned Storm in the title, and then device registration once at the very end. So 99% of it's awesome, like 5 years ago. It's not great for Storm. Like, we got to accelerate. We got to come up to modern times quicker. And then Microsoft did do some general stuff that they're referencing, which is identity stuff. It's not bad, but, yes, attack in the middle we know about, Evil Nginx, conditional access policies. Oh, change your networking with global secure access. Some of these just aren't practical as a solution. Device code phishing is mentioned. Okay, block it, right? We already talked about. Consent phishing is, well, it's not just device code phishing. Great, credit to Microsoft. Thank you. That's good that you're recognizing it. But the last part of that box on the right is like, there's a reply URL when you create an app, Microsoft. And so they're basically saying when you cancel, you still get redirected, which opens up for the attacker another chance to redirect you to their man-in-the-middle site saying, oh, well, enter your credentials again. Don't cancel out. You need to do it to, make sure we know it's you, that was not the Russian. So it's dumb. They put in the redirect for app user niceness, which just causes problems for all of us on the security side, right, operationally. Device join phishing is at least mentioned. Now we're back to registration. Requiring authentication strength, MFA, is not a bad idea for device registration. Give it a try. Impersonation, QR codes I mentioned, just because it's ongoing. Device code flow allows for a QR code, and some of the apps allow you to pre-populate the device code. You can make it part of the get parameter, and the QR code, of course, can embody that. So, I think Nevada and Com, who spoke here, and ongoing have Squarefish. They're pushing the envelope, or at least keeping it alive there on better ways to phish. Those guys are worth tracking. That way we'll get the front end tracked and not fall behind. And then the intra-org device code phishing and then impersonation alerts. I just point that out. Of course we know trusted parties phishing us, blah, 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 are more likely to fool all of us. My only question is, so maybe you shouldn't make default members in Entra be able to hit /users and grab the whole directory, right? Because no one else does that. Like, privilege access by default. And I get why you want to know that, because you got to invite someone to your Teams chat and pull up a directory. But no other cloud provider thinks quite like that. You start with 0, and then some admin says, oh yeah, you should be able to look at every user attribute in the directory. Of course, the attacker will want to have a target. Hey, here's Joe. Hey Joe, I'm Bill. I work in the same department. Blah, 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 right? And it's the attacker going for the secondary phish. So there's related issues, not just in this attack. Multi-factor is not a bad idea. The exclusions, I'll give them credit. That's the problem. There's always exclusions to MFA. Break glass accounts and service accounts. And service principals, really, because that's what service accounts really are in Entra. And so all the other talks this weekend and the ongoing talks are about service principal abuse. And it's not just the ones created by OAuth apps. It's the ones you have with federated identities, which are pretty popular, workloads included, not just people. And it's also ones you create, the two-legged ones, the one local ones to allow a connection from externally. And it's Microsoft service principals. So you got to follow Eric Woodruff and others who talk about abusing, even the Datadog research teams talking about abusing Microsoft apps. Basically, you have admin privileges, go set a credential in a Microsoft service principal. You set it, now you can take it over. Yeah, you're elevated, but you can maybe elevate more, right? So that was Eric Woodruff. Go from app administrator to global admin. So that's the dirty sort of, there's a whole bunch of side attacks that are coming, even though we're talking about a defense that might be reasonable. So I'm at the end of my slides. I'm not too much over. I think the plan is I'll be around in the CTF room and the hallway if you have follow-up. Otherwise, love if you have stuff, questions, criticisms. Reach out to me on any of my previous stuff. Just trying to move the discussion forward because we really need to be thinking about this more and better. So thanks for coming.